Chapter 9, page 40. For the first time in 3 nights, Okonkwo slept. He woke up once in the middle of the night, and his mind went back to the past 3 days without making him feel uneasy. He began to wonder why he had felt uneasy. It was like a man wondering in broad daylight why a dream had appeared so terrible to him at night. Okonkwo turned on his side and went back to sleep. He was roused in the morning by someone banging on his door. "Who is that?" he growled. He knew it must be Akwefi. She was the only one who would have the boldness to bang on his door. "Azima is dying," came her voice, and all the tragedy of her life was packed in the words. Okonkwo sprang from his bed, pushed back the bolt on his door, and ran into Akwefi's hut. Azima lay shivering on a mat beside a huge fire that her mother had kept burning all night. "It is fever," said Okonkwo, as he took his machete and went into the bush to collect the leaves and barks that went into the making of medicine for fever. Azima was an only child and the center of her mother's world. Akwefi even gave her delicacies such as eggs, which children were rarely allowed to eat because such food tempted them to steal. One day, as Azima was eating an egg, Okonkwo had come in unexpectedly. He was shocked and swore to beat Akwefi if she dared to give the child eggs again. And after Akwefi was reprimanded, Azima developed a keen appetite for eggs. She enjoyed above all the secrecy in which she now ate them. Her mother always took her into their bedroom and shut the door. Azima called her mother by her name, Akwefi, as grown-up people did. The relationship between them was something like the companionship of equals. Akwefi had suffered in her life. She had borne 10 children, and 9 of them had died in infancy. She has buried one child after another. Her sorrow gave way to despair, and then grim resignation. The birth of her children, which should be a woman's glory, became mere physical agony. Her deepening despair found expression in the names of her children. One of them was Anwambiko. "Death, I implore you." But death took no notice. Anwambiko died in his 15th month. Akwefi became defiant and called her next child Onwuma. "Death may please himself." And he did. After the death of Akwefi's second child, Okonkwo went to a medicine man, who told him the child was an Obanji, one of these wicked children who, when they died, entered their mother to be born again. "When your wife becomes pregnant again," the medicine man said, "let her not sleep in her hut. Let her go and stay with her people, and that way she will break the evil cycle of birth and death." Akwefi did this. As soon as she became pregnant, she went to live with her mother. The child was Onwambiko. He was not given a proper burial when he died. Okonkwo called in another medicine man, famous for his great knowledge of Obanji. He asked Okonkwo a few questions. "On what day was it born?" "Oyi," replied Okonkwo. "And it died this morning?" Okonkwo said yes, and only then realized the child had died on the same day as it had been born. The neighbors also saw the coincidence. The medicine man ordered there would be no mourning for the dead child. He took a sharp razor and cut it. Then he took it out to bury in the evil forest, dragging it behind him. After such treatment, it would think twice before coming again, unless it was one of the stubborn ones. And by the time Onwambiko died, Akwefi was a bitter woman. Her husband's first wife had already had 3 sons, all strong and healthy. Akwefi had nothing but good wishes for her, but she had grown so bitter about her own chi that she could not rejoice with others over their good fortune. When Niyoe's mother celebrated the birth of her sons, Akwefi was the only unhappy one. The other wife took this for ill will. How could she know that Akwefi's bitterness did not flow to others, but to her own soul? That she did not blame others for their good fortune, but her own evil chi, who denied her any. At last, Azima was born. and although she was ailing, she seemed determined to live. At first, Akwefi accepted her with resignation, but when she lived her 6th year, love returned once more to the mother, as well as anxiety. She determined to nurse this child to health. She was rewarded by occasional spells of health, but all of a sudden, Azima would go down again. Everyone knew she was Ogbanji. But she had lived so long, perhaps she had decided to stay. Some Ogbanji did take pity on their mothers and stayed. Akwefi believed deep inside that Azima had come to stay. Her faith had been strengthened a year before when a medicine man had dug up Azima's Iya-Uwa. Azima's Iya-Uwa was a smooth pebble wrapped in a dirty rag. The man who dug it up was Okagbue, who was famous for his knowledge in these matters. "Where did you bury your Iya-Uwa?" he had asked Azima. She was 9 then, recovering from a serious illness. "What is that?" she asked. "You know what it is. You buried it in the ground so that you can die and return to torment your mother." Azima looked at her mother, whose sad, pleading eyes were fixed on her. The medicine man turned again to Azima. "Where did you bury your Iya-Uwa?" "Where they buried children," she said. And they set out with Azima leading the way. At the main road, Azima turned left, and the crowd followed her silently. Azima turned left into the bush, and the crowd followed her. Then she suddenly turned round and began to walk back to the road, and then back home. "Where did you bury your Iya-Uwa?" asked Okagbue when Azima stopped by her father's hut. "It's near that orange tree," she said. "And why did you not say so, you wicked daughter?" Okonkwo swore furiously. The medicine man ignored him. "Come and show me the exact spot," he said quietly to Azima. "It is here," she said when they got to the tree, and she touched the ground with her finger. "Bring me a hoe," said Okagbue. Akwefi brought it, and he sat to work digging a pit. The pit grew deeper and deeper. Okagbue worked tirelessly and in silence. Neighbors stood around watching. The pit was so deep they no longer saw the digger. Suddenly, Okagbue sprang to the surface. "It is very near now," he said. "I have felt it. Call your wife and child," he said to Okonkwo. Then he went back to the pit, and after a few more hoefuls of earth, he struck the Iya-Uwa. He raised it carefully with the hoe and threw it to the surface. Some ran away in fear when it was thrown, but they soon returned, and everyone was gazing at the rag. Okagbue emerged. He untied the rag, and the smooth, shiny pebble fell out. "Is this yours?" he asked Azima. "Yes," she replied, and all the women shouted with joy because Akwefi's troubles were at last ended. This had happened more than a year before, and Azima had not been ill since. And then suddenly she had begun to shiver in the night. Akwefi built a fire, but Azima got worse and worse. Akwefi knelt by her, praying 1,000 times. Her husband's wives said it was only fever. She did not hear them. Okonkwo returned from the bush, carrying a large bundle of grasses and leaves, medicinal roots and bark. He went into Akwefi's hut and sat down. "Get me a pot," he said, "and leave the child alone." Akwefi brought the pot, and Okonkwo selected the best from the bundle and put them in the pot. Akwefi poured in water. "Is that enough?" she asked when she poured in about half the water in the bowl. "A little more." "I said a little! Are you deaf?" Okonkwo roared at her. Then he stood to return to his hut. "You must watch the pot carefully and don't allow it to boil over. If it does, its power will be gone." Akwefi began to tend the medicine pot. Her eyes went constantly from Azima to the boiling pot and back to Azima. Okonkwo returned when he felt the medicine had cooked long enough. He took down the pot and roused Azima and placed her astride the steaming pot. Azima struggled to escape but was held down. Akwefi mopped her as she lay down and was soon asleep. Answer the questions for Chapter 9.